Did you know that a dowry is still a thing in Asia? FYI, a dowry is the money that the woman or the family of the woman brings into a marriage. The bride price is the money that the groom pays the parents of the woman or the bride so that he can marry the bride. The logic behind it being that the family of the woman considers the woman a burden. So they bring in money and give it to the husband or into the marriage so that the husband can take the woman off the family. I know that it's hard to understand how something like that still exists in the age of consciousness, but culture rarely makes sense unless it is your own. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense even if it is your own. And Asia is the one place that does not lack uniqueness in terms of culture. And so here are 10 unique things about our culture, specifically the family dynamics, that would probably help for you to understand, especially if you're hanging out around a lot of Asians. Number 1, children stay at home longer than they should. You know how in Western countries, children actually move out of their parents' house when they reach college, or sometimes even sooner. That does not happen in Asian countries. Children stay at home for as long as they can. So don't be surprised when you walk into an Asian house and there's like 5 generations living in the house. Children actually do stay at home even after they get married. That's a very common practice. On the flip side, we also do not kick out our olds. So when our grandparents or our parents are too old to take care of themselves, we do not move them to a home. In fact, almost everything that we do in our life is motivated by the effort to keep the family together. Number 2, helping out financially is a very common thing among Asians. And it's not only when you're well off or super rich. It's very common for older siblings to financially support the education of the next sibling. And then once that sibling graduates and get a job, then it would be his or her turn to help the other sibling. And it's not just among immediate family members. It happens even when you're an aunt and your nephew or niece needs help because the parents can't just hack it on their own. I do remember a professor discussing, he said that he feels that it's very impractical because it inhibits your own financial growth. Because instead of being able to invest the money in some way, either through a business or through personal growth, you're using that money for somebody else. And so you get stuck. And I have to say, he is probably right from a certain perspective. But culturally, helping somebody else out, especially if it is a family member, that's progress for us. That's growth. And that is probably a greater growth than any financial growth you can imagine. You also have to understand that while Western kids are trained and prepared for independence and individuality, Asian kids are prepared and trained and brainwashed, you can call it whatever you want to call it, towards family. So our sense of self is connected to our family. And that extension, that identity includes even the ones you don't like within your family. Number 3, hitting kids still a very common practice among Asians. They just whoop our asses. And it hurts. Bad. You will remember it. They make it count. That not all parents, of course, do it. Between my parents, it was only actually my mom who hit me. And I remember every single time that she did. I guess it worked because I did not end up in jail. I'm not going around shanking people. Number 4, men is still the boss in the household. I think this is one aspect of our culture that needs to evolve real fast. Women are still required, at least socially, to take their husband's name when they get married. And that speaks volume on how women are seen in Asia. Even when it's becoming more common for women to actually be earning as much as men, they are still treated as someone below their husband. They say that religion has a lot to do with it, but majority of the religions in Asian countries actually profess or teach that women should submit to men. I remember though when I was a kid, my dad telling me that he believes women should have the freedom to choose what last name they would carry, whether or not they want to adapt the last name of their husbands or not. He also told me that he would be totally okay if I would rather use my mother's last name. I didn't really think much of it at that moment, but reflecting on it, I feel very proud that he was one of those very few people that he was not just saying those words, but he was actually willing to follow through with it. Because on some of the scripts that I did, I was actually using my mom's last name, and he never said anything. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of men like him. I do have a friend who got married several years ago, and just recently she went to her husband and told him that she wanted to revert back to her maiden name. And the husband was so upset and said that it was a disrespect not just to him, but to his father. And I was so tempted to say, well, what about your father? Talking to my friend, what about your father? I mean, I'm sure his father was a great man and he was such a nice guy, but it was her father who raised her. So if there's anything or anybody that she should honor, it should be her father, right? Number 5, the culture of gratitude actually starts at home. I think the best demonstration of this would be how Asians, especially young people, perceive their success. I remember this article written about BTS. Everybody knows I'm a fan of BTS. And the title of the article slips me now, but there was this journalist who was writing about how surprised he was at how BTS was viewing their success like it was undeserved. They did not work hard enough for it. And so they have to spend their entire life working for it, deserving it. As it was just something that's common among Asians. There's always this humility in us because that's how we were raised at home. We're all made to understand and believe that just existing does not afford us anything. And the only thing that we deserve are the basic essentials. And whatever we will have that is excess of the basic essentials, that's a privilege. And the best way for us to express our gratitude is by working hard for it, just grateful for whatever it is that you are given. Even if you've worked for it, because if you look around, other people are working just as hard. And there are probably other people that are working harder than you are. And yet it is you that managed to get all of these things. I'm sure that you've heard of how Asian kids work so hard at school. The attitude of gratitude is part of that. There's always that mindset that we need to deserve everything that's happening to us, and so we need to continuously work hard for it. I'm sure that Dr. Phil is not going to agree with that, but it's okay. Shrink as a concept is not a very popular thing in Asia anyway. Number 6 is excellence is always demanded among Asian kids. That there's always this desire to live up to what it is that you have. You are trying to deserve it. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is the desire to be better, to try and live a better life than the life that your parents had. That is probably rooted on how most Asian countries are actually poor. And so parents are always striving to provide a better life for their kids. And so they, in turn, condition their kids to try and live a better life than the one that they lived. And add to that is the layer of us wanting to have a better social reputation. Because we're very social. While Western kids are trained and prepared for independence, Asian kids are trained and prepared and brainwashed towards social living. And it starts with a family. And unfortunately or fortunately, family in Asia as a concept is not just limited to your immediate ones. Anything or anybody that shows up in reunions, they're their immediate family. So it's a very social concept. The standard of that unit, that social unit, becomes a very important thing for us. So you have to strive and be better than everybody else because you're going to get compared. Number 7, seniority matters. There is a huge amount of power that comes with age. I think one glaring representation of this is how we address people who are older than us. In Western countries, you just call your older siblings by their name, and sometimes even your aunts and your uncles, you just call them by their name. That's a no-no in the Philippines and in other parts of Asia. There is a certain tag that we attach to their name when we want to address them. So for the Philippines, it's ate and kuya for older sisters and older brother. There's yung and nuna for Korea, and there's achi for Chinese, and different versions in other countries. But you never call them by their first name alone. That's very disrespectful. You are not allowed to answer back to people that are older than you, even if they're wrong. And they are wrong a lot of times, but you can't tell them that. When the parents are not around, authority is transferred to the next oldest person, not necessarily the one who deserves it. Number 8, lineage is very important. There is an unbelievable obsession to continue their DNA. I don't know why. It's probably a premium DNA or something. Adoption as a concept is not very popular in Asia because there's always this obsession and assumption that the only kid that you need to have is one of your own. It's very sad. I personally want to adopt. When I first told my family about it, everyone just discouraged me and they looked at me as if I was insane. I probably am, but not because I wanted to adapt. It's interesting because when I looked at my journals that I wrote when I was a kid, but the early entries that I had, I actually already mentioned that I wanted to adopt. So I guess it has always been in me. Number 9, food is a huge thing among Asians. It is almost always the center of any gathering, celebration, parties, formal or informal, intimate or big ones. Food is always the center. You're forced fed and made to feel guilty if you're not eating a lot. Even when it's a casual visit to one of your aunt's home, you're forced to bring some food home. And if you gain weight because of that, they're always the first one to comment. Number 10, an entire clan is immediate family. So extended family as a concept does not exist in Asia. Anybody who appears in your family reunion at least once in your lifetime is considered immediate family. And these extended family members enjoy the same privilege, responsibilities, and curses that an immediate family actually has. And so that's the 10. Those are just 10 things, and by no means meant to be comprehensive. There's a whole lot more about our culture than just the annoying things. I can guarantee you though that if you ever end up visiting an Asian home, a Filipino home, Korean home, or whatever, you are going to have the meal of your life.